Let me talk to you today about something that I believe sits at the very foundation of every life well lived. Something that, if you get it right, everything else begins to fall into place. And if you get it wrong, if you neglect it, if you trade it away for comfort or approval or a moment of belonging, everything else begins to fall apart. Not immediately, not dramatically, not in ways you can easily point to and explain, but gradually, quietly, the way a house settles when the ground beneath it shifts almost imperceptibly at first, until one morning you notice the cracks in the walls and wonder how you never saw them coming. I want to talk to you about self-respect. Now, I know that phrase gets tossed around. People say it casually, almost reflexively. Have some self-respect, as though it is a coat you put on when the weather turns cold, as though it is a simple matter of posture or speaking up at the right moment or not letting someone talk down to you in front of a crowd. But I am telling you today, self-respect goes so much deeper than any of that. It is not a gesture. It is not a mood you access on good days and misplace on bad ones. It is not a social performance. It is a philosophy. It is a way of seeing yourself, a way of treating yourself, and ultimately, a way of showing up for the entire world around you. And the reason I want to begin here, the reason this is the starting point of everything I have come to believe about human potential and personal development and the quiet art of building a meaningful life, is because of this observation, an observation that has followed me across decades of working with people from every background and every circumstance imaginable. Most people do not respect themselves. Most people have never been taught to. Most people have spent the better part of their lives seeking from other people the very thing they never learned to give themselves. And that, I want you to understand, is a tragedy. Not the loud kind of tragedy that gets captured in photographs or makes the evening news. The quiet kind, the slow kind, the kind that lives behind polished teeth and rehearsed laughter and the carefully maintained appearance of a life that is working. The kind that keeps brilliant, talented, capable people stuck in situations they know are beneath them because somewhere along the way, in ways they may not even be able to fully explain, they stopped believing they deserved better. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. Let's talk about where self-respect actually comes from. Because if you misunderstand the source, you will spend your whole life looking in the wrong places and wondering why you can never seem to find what you are after. Self-respect does not come from other people. That is the first thing you must firmly establish in your mind. You cannot borrow it. You cannot inherit it from parents who had it or compensate for parents who did not. Nobody can hand it to you in a ceremony or whisper it into your consciousness and suddenly transform the way you see yourself. It cannot be purchased and it cannot be bestowed. Self-respect is something you construct day by day, choice by choice, through the slow and deliberate accumulation of promises you make to yourself and actually keep. Through the decisions you make in the private hours when nobody is watching and nobody would know the difference. Through the standards you hold yourself to when the easier, more comfortable path is standing right there in front of you, wide open, welcoming you to take it. Think about that for a moment and be honest with yourself. When you wake up in the morning and you said you were going to exercise and you do not, what happens inside you? Something small but genuinely real occurs. A tiny withdrawal from the account of your own integrity. A subtle message sent from your actions to your inner sense of self. I said I would do this and I did not do it. When you said you were going to stop doing something that you know is harmful to your body, to your clarity of thinking, to your most important relationships, and you do it anyway, what happens? Another withdrawal, and another. The account grows negative quietly, without announcement, without any single dramatic moment you can point to as the turning point. And after years of this, after years of small betrayals of the self, small compromises of the person you said you were going to be, people arrive at 40 or 50 or 60 wondering why they carry this deep and nameless dissatisfaction, why nothing feels quite right even when much of it looks quite good, why success, when it finally arrives, feels somehow hollow in the hand, why relationships, even genuinely good ones, feel insufficient, why the life they have built does not bring the contentment they believed it would. It is because they have been living outside of their own integrity for so long that they no longer feel at home inside their own skin. And that estrangement from yourself is one of the most uncomfortable experiences a human being can carry. Here's what I want you to understand about that discomfort. You cannot out-earn it. You cannot travel far enough to leave it behind. You cannot find enough applause in enough rooms to drown it out for long. That persistent, nameless dissatisfaction is the voice of the neglected self. It is the part of you that knows you are capable of more, the part that knows what you are actually made of, the part that recognizes the gap between the life you are living and the life you are capable of building. And that gap will not stop speaking until you address it at its origin. The origin is self-respect, always. Now let me say something about discipline, because discipline and self-respect are not two separate subjects. They are the same subject, viewed from slightly different angles. When you discipline yourself, when you make a commitment and you honor it, when you hold yourself to a standard even when honoring it is inconvenient, when you do the work even when you are tired and the motivation has temporarily vanished, you are making a statement to yourself. You are saying, I matter. What I said I would do matters. The person I am in the process of becoming matters. And every time you say that with your actions rather than merely with your words, every time you honor that truth with your behavior, you deposit something into your self-respect account that belongs entirely to you and that no one can ever take away from you. Because here's the truth that I want you to hold on to. Self-respect is not arrogance. Let me be very clear about this distinction because people confuse the two regularly and the confusion costs them enormously. Arrogance is the mask that people wear when they have no self-respect and are deeply afraid that someone will notice. Arrogance is loud precisely because it is terrified of silence. Arrogance makes noise about its own greatness because it cannot afford stillness. Arrogance pushes other people down because it has no other available strategy for feeling tall. Self-respect, genuine, earned, deeply rooted self-respect, is quiet. It is steady. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to make comparisons. It does not need an audience. It simply is. And the person who carries it does not need to prove anything to anyone because they have already proven the most important thing. They have proven it to themselves in the private hours when no one was watching, and that proof cannot be argued with or taken away. And when you prove it to yourself, something remarkable begins to happen. The opinions of others, that constant, exhausting, invisible referendum on your worth, begin to lose their grip on you. Not because you become cold or indifferent to connection, because people of genuine self-respect are often some of the warmest, most generous, most fully present individuals you will ever have the privilege of knowing. But their warmth does not flow from neediness. Their generosity does not rise from a desperate calculation that giving will finally make them worthy of love. They give because they have something genuinely real to give. They connect because they arrive at the relationship whole, not looking to be completed by another person, not seeking in another human being what they have failed to cultivate in themselves. And that single difference changes everything about the quality of what you build. Every relationship, every partnership, every professional association and personal friendship, everything that involves another human being is fundamentally altered when you bring self-respect to the table rather than the hollow substitute of desperate approval seeking. Let me tell you what I have observed over many years across many cities in rooms with thousands of different people. The individuals who have built truly extraordinary lives, not just financially successful lives, though many of them certainly built that too. The ones who have built lives genuinely rich in meaning, in purpose, in authentic human connection, in the kind of satisfaction that does not evaporate in the dark hours of the night. These people share a quality. I noticed it early, and I have noticed it consistently ever since. They have a relationship with themselves that is honest. They see themselves with clarity, their genuine strengths alongside their real limitations, their characteristic tendencies alongside their known weaknesses, and they neither inflate nor deflate what they see. They are truthful with themselves in a manner that most people are simply not. And from that truthfulness, over time, there grows a kind of dignity, not superiority, dignity, which is something entirely and importantly different. Dignity says, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, I know what I will and will not accept in my life, and I am at peace with that knowledge. Superiority says, I am better than you. Dignity says, I am enough. And the person who has genuinely arrived at that understanding, not in the superficial way of a slogan on a wall, but in the deep bones of who they are, forged through years of honest self-governance, that person is standing on ground that does not shake. Now let me walk you through what building self-respect actually looks like in the daily texture of a life, because I believe firmly and always in the practical. Philosophy without application is merely entertainment. It is comfortable to think about. It is insufficient to live on. It begins with your word, more specifically, the word you give to yourself. You see, most people are dramatically more reliable to others than they are to themselves. They would never dream of letting a trusted colleague down the way they routinely, habitually let themselves down. They would be genuinely mortified to break a promise to a close friend the way they casually, repeatedly break promises to themselves every single week. I will start Monday, after the holidays, once things settle down, once the children are older, once the pressure eases. And Monday arrives and the holidays pass and the pressure never eases and the children grow and still the promises pile up like unpaid debts in a ledger you pretend not to see. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you stop trusting yourself. And when you stop trusting yourself, you stop believing in yourself. And when you stop believing in yourself, you stop genuinely trying. Not loudly or all at once, you still go through the motions, you still make the plans, you still talk about what you intend to do. But something underneath the effort has gone quiet. The real investment, the one that requires actual risk and genuine vulnerability, diminishes. And the life you wanted recedes, gently and without drama, into the background. Start small. That is my counsel to you tonight. Start with something so manageable it might seem almost trivial. Make yourself a promise this evening that you are genuinely capable of keeping tomorrow morning, and keep it. Then make another. Keep that one too. Build a track record with yourself, because that track record is the raw material from which self-respect is constructed. Those kept promises are the bricks. The days you honored your commitments to yourself are the mortar. And one day, not dramatically, not all at once, but one ordinary morning when you are not particularly paying attention, you look up and realize you have built something substantial, something that is entirely yours and entirely real. Now, I want to address something that I think is one of the most pervasive thieves of self-respect in modern life. It has always existed in human nature, but today it operates on a scale and with a sophistication that makes it more dangerous than it has ever been before. I am talking about the hunger for approval, the need for external validation, the quiet addiction to the judgments and assessments of other people. Let me tell you specifically how approval seeking destroys self-respect, because understanding the mechanism is the first step toward dismantling it. When you need another person to approve of your choices before you can feel genuinely good about them, you have handed that person enormous authority over your inner life. You have made them the author of your self-worth. And here is the corrosive problem with that arrangement. Their approval, when it arrives, feels genuinely wonderful for a period of time. But it does not last. It cannot last, because you know at some level that it was their assessment and not yours. Their perception of you and not your understanding of yourself. And so you need more of it. You need continuous reassurance. And gradually, the way rivers shape the landscape, not in a single rush, but through years of patient pressure, you begin to shape your choices, your career decisions, your relationships, your ambitions, your very sense of what is possible for you, around the preferences and expectations of people whose lives you may not actually admire, and whose judgment you might not choose to trust if you were thinking about it honestly. I have seen it happen in the most talented people. I have watched gifted individuals make career decisions based entirely on what they believed would impress people they barely knew and would never see again. I have watched people remain in cities they had long since outgrown because moving would require admitting a mistake, and the social judgment of others felt more painful than the daily reality of a life that no longer fit. I have watched people stay in relationships that were genuinely costing them their vitality and their vision because the social arithmetic of leaving seemed too expensive to pay. And in every single one of these situations, the root issue was identical. These people had not yet built sufficient self-respect to trust their own judgment in the face of external pressure. They had outsourced their most consequential decisions to people who were not equipped to make them, who did not have access to all the relevant information, and who, if we are being completely frank, had quite enough difficulty navigating their own lives without being given responsibility for someone else's. Your life is yours to live. I know how obvious that sounds. I know it barely seems worth stating, and yet the proportion of people who are not actually living their own life, who are performing a version of a life designed and maintained for the benefit of an audience of people whose respect they are perpetually working to earn, is genuinely astonishing. And it is exhausting, this performance. Exhausting in a particular way, the way that false things are always exhausting, because maintaining a fiction requires ongoing effort in a way that simply being yourself does not. Living for an audience is draining in proportion to how much the performance differs from the reality, and the standards of the audience change, the critics shift, the fashions of approval move. No matter how well you perform on any given day, there will be someone in the room who is unimpressed. And if their validation is what sustains you, you will spend the entirety of your days adjusting the act. Liberate yourself from the audience. That is what self-respect ultimately asks of you, not coldness toward other people. Genuine indifference to others is its own form of poverty, and I am not recommending it, but a settled, secure, internally rooted sense of your own value that does not rise and fall with the daily verdict of those around you, a center of gravity that belongs to you. And here is something I want you to know about the people whose respect you most genuinely want to earn. The ones worth earning it from. The ones with substance, with depth, with something real behind their eyes. They will extend that respect to you precisely in the moment when you stop needing it from them. Because nothing commands authentic admiration like a person who is genuinely at home in who they are. Nothing draws people in like real self-possession. The individuals you encounter who carry the most natural authority, who seem to attract loyalty and collaboration and genuine trust without seeking it, who make everyone around them feel more settled simply by being in the room. They are not the ones trying hardest to impress. They are the ones who have most completely stopped pretending, who have accepted themselves fully, chosen themselves deliberately, and committed to their own standards regardless of who is watching and regardless of what the watching might cost them socially. That is self-respect made visible in the world, and it is one of the most genuinely powerful forces in all of human interaction. Now let me turn to what I consider one of the most revealing tests of whether self-respect is truly alive in you. Not how you carry yourself on good days, not how confidently you move through the world when circumstances are favorable and the people around you are encouraging and the future seems clear. The real test is this: how do you treat yourself when things go wrong? What is your inner dialogue when you fail? What story do you tell yourself in the difficult stretches when the dreams feel distant and the progress seems insufficient? And the question of whether any of this is worth it begins to sound genuinely reasonable. Because here is what I have watched people do in those moments. The people who have not yet built genuine self-respect. They collapse into self-pity. They become small. They use the difficulty as evidence against themselves, as confirmation of a verdict that was already secretly waiting to be handed down. This is simply who I am. This is just how things go for me. Things do not work out the way I plan them, they never have, and this is simply more proof of that established truth. And in telling themselves that story with sufficient conviction and sufficient repetition, they begin gradually and genuinely to inhabit it. Not because the story was necessarily accurate in the first place, but because they have lived inside it long enough that it has become indistinguishable from reality. The person with self-respect does something fundamentally different in those stretches of difficulty. They acknowledge the hardship with honesty, because pretending difficulty does not exist is its own form of dishonesty, and dishonesty in any direction erodes self-respect as surely as anything else. But they refuse to allow the difficulty to speak for them. They decline to let the adversity write the conclusion of their story. They say, quietly and with the steadiness of someone who has been tested before and come through it, "This is genuinely hard. I am struggling in real ways, and I am still here. I am still making choices. I am still moving in a meaningful direction." That refusal, that quiet, undefeated, clear-eyed refusal to be defined by your worst moment, is self-respect operating under the most demanding conditions. It is the highest expression of it. And I want to tell you something about what is waiting on the other side of those seasons of difficulty, about what becomes available to the people who move through hardship with their integrity undamaged. There is a particular quality of confidence, and I want to be precise about this because there are many kinds of confidence, and not all of them are equal, that only becomes accessible to someone who has been genuinely tested, not the brittle, performance-dependent confidence of someone who has only ever succeeded in comfortable circumstances, not the loud, compensatory confidence of someone who has never allowed themselves to fail because they have never allowed themselves to genuinely try, but a deep, tempered, constitutionally settled confidence that comes specifically from having been in difficulty and discovered that you were equal to it. From having looked directly at your worst circumstances, without flinching and without manufactured optimism, and found that you were adequate to meet what was there. That quality of confidence cannot be taught in any room. It cannot be transmitted through any book or curriculum. It must be earned through the living of it, and it is earned in precisely those moments when, against the more comfortable available option, you choose to stand. Now, I want to address the relationship between self-respect and the standards you hold yourself to, because standards are where self-respect moves from being a feeling into being an actual life. Standards are how self-respect acquires substance and weight and real consequence. They are the rules you genuinely live by, not the rules imposed on you from outside, not the rules you recite because someone else wrote them and expected you to follow, but the rules you have chosen for yourself because they accurately reflect the person you have decided to be. What are your actual standards? Not the ones you feel you should have because someone else told you to have them. The ones you believe in. The lines you will not cross regardless of convenience. The treatment you will not accept regardless of who is offering it or what it might cost you to decline it. The behavior you will not engage in even when the benefit of engaging in it would be real and the cost of declining it would be immediate and visible. Because here is what happens every time you compromise a genuine standard. Every time you cross a line you told yourself was a line. You feel it. Perhaps not dramatically. Perhaps in ways you can rationalize away before the feeling becomes too uncomfortable to manage. But in the honest quiet of your own inner experience, you register the cost. And that cost is always the same currency. A portion of your self-respect, subtracted without ceremony from an account whose balance matters more than any other. And conversely, and this is equally important to understand, every time you hold to a standard when it is genuinely difficult to do so, every time you choose honesty when the comfortable misdirection is available, every time you do the right thing when doing the wrong thing would be more immediately rewarding every time you honor a commitment that has become genuinely inconvenient to honor, you earn something real and lasting and entirely yours. You earn the right to look at yourself honestly and feel neither shame nor the desperate need to look away. That right, that simple, profound ability to be with yourself in clarity and without apology is worth more than any acquisition, any achievement, any accolade, any amount of money that any external circumstances could ever provide you. Let me now speak to the relationship between self-respect and the quality of your ambition, because they are connected in ways that most people have not thought carefully about, and the connection matters enormously to the actual results you produce. People without genuine self-respect tend toward one of two extremes when it comes to ambition. They either practice a false modesty that is not really modesty at all, but rather preemptive self-protection, a way of declaring their own limitations before the world can declare them. Oh, I could never do something like that. That is for other kinds of people. I would not even know where to begin. Or they go the other direction entirely, making grand proclamations and sweeping declarations about what they intend to accomplish that function as a substitute for the actual effort that accomplishment requires, as though announcing the vision is equivalent to executing it, as though the statement is the same as the work. The person of genuine self-respect does neither. They see their potential honestly, including what they are capable of becoming with concentrated effort and genuine commitment over time, and they pursue that potential steadily, without requiring an audience for the pursuit and without the false modesty that keeps people smaller than they need to be. They do the work, they make the progress, they build the thing, and the results eventually speak in the way that results always speak when they are allowed to develop naturally, which is clearly and without needing to be defended. Because here is something I want you to understand about the nature of ambition that is rooted in self-respect versus ambition that is rooted in its absence. Ambition rooted in genuine self-respect is sustainable across time. It is not fueled by desperation. It is not powered by the need to prove something to the people who once dismissed you. It is not a mechanism for compensating for old wounds or settling old scores. Those are exhausting engines. They burn hot and they burn out. Ambition powered by self-respect is different. It is quieter. It is steadier. It is fueled not by what you are escaping, but by what you are building toward. Not by revenge, but by expression. By the simple, profound, deeply human desire to become the fullest version of what you are actually capable of being, because that goal is worthy and beautiful entirely on its own terms, without requiring justification from anyone. Because you were given a life. You were given certain abilities and certain inclinations and a certain finite number of years in which to work with what you have been given. And the question that existence is asking you, quietly and persistently, through every morning you wake up with the opportunity to choose how you will spend the day. The question is simply this: what will you do with it? Not what will you make of it relative to what someone else made of theirs. Not what will you accomplish that will make the doubters regret their doubts. Just what will you do with it? And self-respect says, I will do something worthy of it, not perfect. Perfection is not the standard and has never been. Not grand or publicly celebrated or recognized in the newspapers, but worthy, honest, full, a life that, when I sit with it in my final years and allow myself to see it clearly, I can regard without the particular heaviness of regret that comes from knowing you had more to give and withheld it. Not because everything unfolded the way you planned, plans always change and surprises always arrive and the map is never the territory, but because you showed up with full investment. You brought yourself completely. You honored the gifts you were given by actually using them. You served the people who mattered to you with the best of what you had, and you were true, genuinely, consistently, without the need for applause, to who you said you were. That is the life that self-respect makes possible, and only self-respect makes it possible. Now, I want to speak about something that I know is difficult for many people to sit with, and that is the relationship between self-respect and the matter of how you treat yourself in the internal conversation, the dialogue that runs continuously beneath the surface of your daily experience, the voice that comments on your choices, evaluates your performance, compares your progress to some standard that may or may not be reasonable, and delivers its verdict on your worth with a consistency and a conviction that no external critic could ever match. Most people, if they were to honestly transcribe the running commentary of their own inner voice, would be genuinely shocked by what they found there. They would not speak to another human being, not to someone they had a grudging professional acquaintance with, let alone someone they cared for, with the harshness, the dismissiveness, the casual cruelty with which they routinely speak to themselves. And yet they continue to do it, because no one has ever told them that they have a choice about it, because it has been running so long that it sounds like truth rather than like commentary, because changing the voice requires first noticing it, and noticing it requires a willingness to look honestly at something that is not always comfortable to see. Self-respect includes, and in fact requires, a fundamental shift in the quality of how you relate to yourself in your own mind. Not the shift into naive positivity that pretends problems do not exist and failures do not happen and weaknesses do not need to be addressed. That is not what I am describing. I am describing the shift from the voice of a harsh, impatient judge who has already rendered a verdict to the voice of a clear-eyed, committed ally who believes in your capacity and tells you the truth in the service of your genuine progress. The difference is not in the honesty of the assessment. Both can be honest. The difference is in whether the honesty is in service of diminishment or in service of growth. Speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone whose potential you genuinely believed in and whose success you were genuinely invested in. Hold yourself accountable with the same seriousness. Notice the shortcomings with the same clarity, and bring to all of it the understanding that you are a work in progress, which means by definition that you are not finished, which means by definition that the current version of you is not the final version. The work is still being done, the story is still being written, and how you choose to narrate that story in the privacy of your own inner life will shape it, consistently and powerfully, in ways that nothing external can match. Let me speak now about the people you allow into your life, because your associations are one of the most significant expressions of the level of self-respect you currently hold, and one of the most significant forces that will either deepen or erode it going forward. I have said many times in many different rooms that you are profoundly shaped by the people you spend the most time with, not just in the obvious ways, in their habits, their attitudes, their financial behaviors, but in subtler and ultimately more consequential ways. You are shaped by what you come to consider normal through repeated exposure, by what you come to expect from yourself through the standards that surround you, by what you come to believe is possible through the examples you witness up close. And critically for our conversation today, you are shaped by how the people closest to you treat you, and how you allow them to treat you tells you more about your current relationship with self-respect than perhaps any other observable indicator. Now I want to be clear about something because this is easily misunderstood. I am not suggesting that you become selective to the point of isolation, or that you cut from your life every imperfect person who has ever said something unkind or let you down. There are no perfect people. Everyone who matters to you will disappoint you at some point because everyone who matters to you is human. Loyalty is a virtue. Commitment to the people you love through difficulty, through their imperfections, and through yours is one of the most meaningful expressions of a life lived with character. I am not diminishing any of that. But there is a difference, a clear and important difference, between standing by someone through difficulty and tolerating a pattern of behavior that consistently diminishes you, between extending grace in a hard moment and erasing the standard that makes genuine relationships possible, between loving someone and losing yourself in the process. And people of genuine self-respect understand that distinction. They hold it clearly. They honor their relationships, and they honor themselves simultaneously because they understand that these are not competing obligations. In fact, you cannot fully honor a relationship if you have not first genuinely honored yourself. Because what you bring to a relationship when you carry no self-respect is your emptiness, and emptiness, however generously offered, cannot nourish anyone. The quality of your associations is not a secondary matter, it is a primary one. Spend time with people who challenge you, who call you to a higher standard of thinking and doing and being, who believe in your potential even and especially when you have temporarily lost faith in it yourself. Spend time with people who tell you the truth, not unkindly, but with the honest care of someone who genuinely wants you to grow, because the person who will only tell you what you want to hear is not your ally. They are your comfortable companion in stagnation. And stagnation, I assure you, is not the friend it presents itself as. Now I want to bring everything together. I want to arrive at the place where all of these threads converge, because they do converge, and the convergence point is important. Everything I have said to you today aren't about discipline and approval seeking, about standards and associations, about ambition and failure and the quality of your inner life. All of it is describing the same thing from different directions. All of it is describing the construction, the maintenance, and the continuous deepening of a genuine relationship with yourself. A relationship built on honesty, on accountability, on the willingness to be truthful about where you are so that you can move with purpose and without self-deception toward where you intend to be. The relationship you have with yourself is the longest relationship you will ever have. Every other relationship in your life will have its season and its natural limits. People you love will come and in the fullness of time, go. Partnerships will evolve and change their form. Careers will begin and conclude. Cities will be home for a while and then become something else. But you will be with yourself from the earliest morning you can recall to the final evening of your days. You will be your own constant companion through every season of abundance and every season of scarcity, through every triumph and every humiliation, through every moment when the future seems full of light and every moment when it seems to have gone entirely dark. And the quality of that companionship, what you bring to your own company, what you say to yourself in the quiet, how faithfully you honor your own commitments, how honestly you see yourself, and how compassionately you treat what you see, will determine, more than any external circumstance ever could, what it feels like to be alive in your particular body, with your particular history in your particular life. So invest in that relationship with the seriousness it deserves, not occasionally. Not when the motivation is convenient, consistently, deliberately, with the understanding that every choice you make about how you treat yourself is a choice about the quality of the only life you have been given to live. Make the promise tonight. Not the grand promise, not the sweeping transformation that attempts to change everything at once and therefore usually changes nothing. Make the specific, honest, achievable promise that you will honor tomorrow morning when the alarm sounds and the world makes its demands and the easier options line up at the door. Keep that promise. Let it be the first brick, because here is the truth that I want to leave you with, the truth that I want you to carry home and sit with in the quiet of your own thinking. You deserve a great life, not because you have perfectly earned it yet, not because the current evidence necessarily supports the claim, not because the circumstances are presently arranged in your favor, but because you are a human being with consciousness and volition and the capacity to grow and change and build and contribute, and any human being equipped with those extraordinary gifts has within them the raw material of something genuinely extraordinary. The only question that has ever mattered is whether you will choose to build it. And that choice, every time you face it, in the small moments and the large ones, in the hours when it is easy and the hours when it requires everything you have, that choice begins with one thing, one foundational, life-determining, endlessly renewable thing. It begins with self-respect. Now, I want to return to something I mentioned earlier because I do not think I have given it the full weight it deserves, and I believe it is critical. I want to talk about the role of environment in the maintenance of self-respect, and specifically about the things you put into your mind every single day. Because we live in an age of extraordinary information abundance, and with that abundance comes a challenge that no previous generation has faced with quite the same intensity. The challenge of choosing carefully what you allow to occupy your mental space, of being deliberate about the intellectual and emotional diet you maintain, of recognizing that the content you consume daily, the voices you allow to speak to you, the images and ideas and narratives you expose yourself to for hours at a time, all of it is shaping you. All of it is influencing the baseline of your thinking, the vocabulary of your inner life, the standards by which you unconsciously measure yourself and the world. A person of genuine self-respect treats their mind the way they would treat something precious and powerful and worth protecting. They are not paranoid about it, not rigidly defensive, not afraid of challenging ideas. Quite the opposite. A mind rooted in self-respect is open, curious, willing to engage with perspectives that differ from its own, because it does not feel threatened by difference. It has the security that comes from knowing its own foundation well enough to explore without getting lost. But that same person is also discerning. They notice what lifts them and what diminishes them. They notice which inputs leave them feeling expanded, more capable, more purposeful, more connected to what matters, and which ones leave them feeling contracted, more anxious, more comparative, more dissatisfied with a life that, examined honestly, has genuine things to commend it. And they make choices based on what they notice because they respect themselves enough to protect the quality of their own experience. Read broadly and deeply. Spend time with ideas that challenge the laziness of your current thinking. Seek out the thinkers and builders and creators who have something genuinely worth offering, and spend time in the company of their best work. Because the quality of what goes into your mind shapes the quality of what comes out of it, and the quality of what comes out of your mind shapes the quality of every decision you make, every relationship you build, every action you take in the world. And be honest about the rest. Be honest about the content that serves no purpose beyond the consumption of time, the endless scrolling, the manufactured outrage, the comparison traps. Not because any single hour of it is catastrophic, but because accumulated hours of it add up to something that has a real and compounding cost to the quality of your thinking and the direction of your attention. And your attention is not a trivial matter. Your attention is your life. Where you point it consistently and deliberately is where your life goes. A person who respects themselves respects their attention. They guard it. They direct it. They refuse to let it be spent by default on whatever happens to be loudest. This is not severity. This is stewardship. And self-respect requires stewardship of the resources you have been given, including the irreplaceable, non-renewable, genuinely priceless resource of your own time and attention. Let me say one more thing, because I think it is the thing that ties everything together in a way that I want you to carry with you, not just tonight, but in the years to come. The world will not always make it easy for you to respect yourself. Let me be honest about that, because false promises are not kindness. The world contains people who will attempt, sometimes deliberately and sometimes without conscious intent, to diminish you, to make you feel smaller than you are, to install in you a doubt about your own worth that serves their interests rather than yours. People who are threatened by your growth or who have their own reasons for needing to believe that you are less than you actually are. People who, for whatever complicated reasons that live in their own history, require you to be uncertain about yourself in order to feel certain about themselves. And there will be circumstances, stretches of time when things go wrong in ways that have nothing to do with your effort or your character, when the randomness and difficulty that are simply part of being alive arrive at your door with full force and make it genuinely hard to maintain the conviction of your own worth. In those moments, with the difficult people and in the difficult circumstances, the only thing that will hold is what is already built inside you, because the voices from outside cannot be controlled, the circumstances from outside cannot be fully controlled, but the foundation of self-respect that you build through years of honest living and consistent self-honoring and genuine integrity in the private moments when no one else will ever know, that foundation is yours, and it can hold what the world throws at it if you have built it with care and maintained it with honesty over the long arc of your years. This is the long game. It is not a sprint. It is not a seminar. It is a life. And the work of building genuine, durable, unshakable self-respect is the work of a lifetime. Not because it takes a lifetime to accomplish, but because it is something you never stop deepening, never stop earning, never stop expressing in new and more nuanced ways as you grow into greater fullness as a human being. Begin now. Continue tomorrow. Never stop. That is all I have ever had to offer you. That is all any of us can ever offer anyone in the end. The invitation to begin, the encouragement to continue, and the assurance rooted in everything I have observed across a long lifetime of watching people build and struggle and grow and sometimes fall and get back up and build again. The assurance that the effort is worth it, that you are worth it, that the life available to the person who genuinely, fully, unshakably respects themselves is not a fantasy. It is real, and it is yours to build, starting from exactly where you stand right now. And let me add this, because I think it needs to be said plainly before we close. The greatest gift you will ever give the people you love is not what you provide for them materially, not the security you create, not the opportunities you make possible, though all of those things have genuine value and I am not diminishing them. The greatest gift you will give them is the example of a person who took their own life seriously, who treated their own potential as something worth honoring, who kept their promises and held their standards and got back up after the hard stretches and kept building with full commitment and full belief in the worth of the effort. Because children learn from what they see, not from what they are told. The people around you take their cues from your behavior, not your words. And the person who genuinely respects themselves becomes, simply by being that person consistently, one of the most powerful positive forces in the lives of everyone within their reach. Not through lectures, not through advice given unsolicited, but through the lived, daily, visible example of what it looks like to inhabit your own life with full presence and full dignity. That is the gift. That is the legacy. That is what self-respect ultimately makes possible. Not just a better life for you, but a better influence in the lives of those who are watching you, learning from you, being shaped by the example you set, whether you have decided to set it or not. You are always setting an example. The only question is what kind. Choose self-respect and let it show. Thank you.